Hey guys, this is the last episode of my conversation with Kioma, and I hope you will like it. If you haven't listened to the first two episodes, I strongly recommend that you do so before enjoying this final part. Welcome to your favorite podcast, Smart, Intellectual, Knowledgeable African. I'm Philippe S.I.K.A, and it's a pleasure to be with you. If you are not yet a member of our amazing community of young intellectuals, all you have to do is to click on the subscribe button to also activate the ring bell so that you don't miss out on any interesting topic. Without further ado, let's enjoy this final part all together. Yeah.
Our politicians are.
Yeah, I think that's a topic. That's a topic for some other day, some other time. Actually, I mean, yeah. So sorry for stopping you. I mean, you can. I don't know if you've made up all your points, but yeah, I mean, this is so. Like, my next question now is to try and understand, like. I'm pretty sure what you're suggesting, you are not the first one suggesting it. I'm pretty sure like there were other people before you, even now, even within our community of people here. Some will agree and some will disagree. But I mean, I would like to try and understand in your opinion, like, why is it that up to 2024 now, we haven't seen that kind of change yet? Like, why haven't we seen more manufacturing in Africa? Why haven't heard more, African leaders, advocating for what you are suggesting right now?
I think we're fighting an uphill battle. There's a lot stopping us. Like I mentioned before, if we become self-sufficient, we are truly self-sufficient as a continent. We do not need anybody else. And that is dangerous for the rest of the world, to have Africa being 100% self-sufficient. So I think there is a lot of pushback against that in various ways that I can't speak on because I'm not in those rooms.
Yeah.
But that pushback makes our development a lot slower. So when a manufacturing plant is built, it's the smallest one you can find, or it's backed by international investment. So it's still not 100% African.
Yeah, you're right.
So even with our developments, it's little by little, but it's still happening against all the pushback. We are still doing it. So you can imagine when that pushback is gone, how quickly we will excel. Because in the midst of all the struggle, we are still trying to improve our lives. You still see small businesses taking off and becoming global leaders. You still see the majority of billionaires are in Africa. You see a lot of growth within the system. You hear of the stories of somebody born into exceptional poverty and makes it out and becomes one of the top people in the world. It's few and far in between, but the fact that it can happen in a system that is basically against the average person shows that there is a lot of talent in Africa, and there is a lot of mental fortitude to push through. So the moment we remove that blockage, I think there is a higher chance of it happening. And obviously, this is not a new idea, like you said.
Okay.
And Africanism has been there, and we see it with even on the political level with what's happening with BRICS. It's not fully Pan-Africanism, but it's bits of it, seeing that we can have a main currency that we can trade with as Africans, without having to use the dollar or the pound right now. But it's not fully an African idea. So like I said, all the African things have been influenced by external factors. So if we can get Africa supporting Africa, it would be a huge boost. It really would. But that requires so many people to come together.
Yeah.
And what are the chances?
Exactly. I think that is what's most daunting about this proposal. And I think you've also touched a very interesting point, the currency point aspect. Like, I mean, that's another very important challenge you also consider, because like we have 54 countries, you know, in Africa.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure we have more than 10 different currencies, you know, on the continent. Unlike when you're taking the European Union, it's actually 27 country members, and they all share, you know, the same currency. So, but again, the question about currency, I think we can discuss it later.
Yeah.
We are not there yet, but I think what you're suggesting, like I said, it's very daunting. And what I like about that is because it's that it actually meets the expectation of this podcast, because this podcast is all about powerful perspectives. Like I would like, you know, to bring young African talent, you know, here to also share what they consider as very original, but also as very powerful. So I think that will lead me to my final question. You know, I mean, this is a very interesting topic. We can keep talking forever and forever, but like, imagine you are actually the next minister or the current minister of commerce in Nigeria, your country of origin. Yeah. So, as the minister of commerce or the minister of international trade, or even as the head of the International Trade Organization, like, if you were to implement your proposal, like, can you just tell us like the few steps that you would follow? Like, what will your initial step be? Like maybe step 1, step 2, and step 3, like in the short term, or maybe in the long. I mean, the short term, it's better, right? I mean, you don't have to cover everything. You just give us, like, you know, at the concluding part, like, you know, how exactly could you implement, you know, your proposal?
I think with the short term, or with the very beginning, what's easiest to do is to trade with neighboring countries.
To increase trade with neighboring countries. Okay.
And trade within, like, your currency to their currency. It's a lot easier than having one standard currency that you would use for all over Africa. I do think also going through a breakthrough of what is imported and what isn't, and trying to see how you can slowly work with other ministers in your like political power to see how you can build like public awareness of what is imported, and see if there's a way to make that manufactured in the country. It's a lot easier to do with foods and natural resources than it is to do with like technology. Yes. So the technological parts would have to be like a slow development, education, making sure that people have access to what they can use to like come up with new ideas. But with the with the more everyday trade and the more social trades like beauty, clothing, very things that you don't necessarily need but helps the economy function. Those type of things can be very much done intertwined. And you can see with the way Africa is set up, our fashion industry don't really know of each other. If a fashion person makes it, they've now gone to Milan and walked the runway there, or they've held a show in a different part of Paris. Africans don't know of each other's achievements. It's even in the fashion space. And fashion is something that reaches everybody. And that's something that should be able to be explored, instead of having huge conglomerates that sell fast fashion into Africa, basically polluting. Have sources where we can now trade with one another on something as simple as clothing, because we all wear clothing, and it would be a lot cheaper to have it move between our seas than having it fly across oceans to meet one another. So I do think that the little things, if I was in a position of that, go through what we have in the country, make sure that's increased to a level that we can sustain ourselves before we sell it. Because I think that's also another thing that Africa faces. We produce 100 apples and we sell 90 of them. Then we're all forced to share 10. So make sure what we have reaches the point where it feeds the citizens, and then the excess is sold. And then on top of it, see what we are importing and work on ways that we can either produce it in-house, grow it in-house, or have it come from a neighboring country, if possible. If not, then leave it as an international trade, because you can't start fighting it as a minister right now.
Yeah.
But just the small things, because it changes. The more you have people, if we take apples for an example, if we are importing all our apples and our country is able to grow it, why not do that? That's job creation. And in all aspects of it, you can, if it gets to the point where it's not just the people actually digging in the dirt, planting the trees and picking the apples, it also moves into administration, it also moves into the career, it also moves into finance, it moves into the tech section, just based off of that one resource of making it being grown in the country. So job creation is a huge thing, from making sure that whatever was imported becomes homegrown, and what we do already grow, we don't just sell everything. Make sure people have access to it at a reasonable price. It's going to shake the market. I definitely am aware of that. But I feel that it is a necessary shake. It is. Every revolution needs it, and this economic revolution definitely needs that.
Yeah. No, I like that perspective. I really like it. I mean, and maybe just to complete your analysis, like I was also thinking about it's a very shocking situation. Like, let's take, for instance, Côte d'Ivoire. Like, Côte d'Ivoire is the first producer of cocoa, worldwide, and yes, it actually creates it gives a lot of revenues, to the government. But like, just to actually meet your point here, like, we tend to first to sell things that we don't even consume at the local market, but we also tend to, like, for the things that we're producing, we tend to oversell, and then we have to go back purchasing the same thing, but at a more expensive price. Like, if you look at the chocolate industry, the first consumers of chocolate in the world are not Africans, but you'll see that the biggest producers of cocoa are actually two African countries, Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire. We also take the coffee. Like, most of the coffee, comes from Africa, but the biggest consumers of coffee are not Africans. So, like you say, it's a revolution, an economic revolution that's going to be painful, but I think the pain might actually be shared between Africa and the international market. Because as a young African, I mean, I don't really need coffee every morning when I wake up. I can just have my bowl of water, and then not even taking breakfast. That's not part of my DNA. I love chocolate, but I can do without chocolate. We have other priorities in Africa. When thinking about, like, food sustainability here, we don't necessarily look at, like, chocolate or the pastries or the coffee stuff. We think about, like, real food, real stuff. We think about, like, the tomato, we think about chicken, we think about, like, rice production, wheat production, like maybe milk, things like that. So I think the last point you've made, I think it's very relevant to also consider that aspect when trying to create or to bring that economic revolution to reality. We also need to reflect, yes, we're making money out of selling some of our natural resources, but we also need to strike a fair balance here, because regardless of how much money, those commodities, brings back, home, we have, on the other hand, to also use part of that money to purchase what we are lacking, in our national or local market. So why not think about, like, very creative ways in order to make sure that, okay, we can continue selling some of our products in the international market, but we also need to make sure that we are able to cover our needs, like when it comes to like basic food security.
Yeah.
So I think this was really interesting. I don't know if you have a last word, before we conclude this episode.
I think thank you for having me. But
Pleasure.
I think we also need to see ways to, whatever we do sell abroad into international markets, we need to find ways to sell to our people as well. So yes, we don't consume chocolates the way the international market does, but there are ways that our ancestors used cocoa beans.
Yeah.
So
100%.
So we need to go back and find out what did we use it for, and find a way to sell it back to our people, so that our people have a need for it. So that yes, we're going to lose money from international markets, but hopefully we can gain some sort of percentage from selling it to our people and having it remain in the country as well.
That's really good.
Intercontinental, because Cote d'Ivoire might not consume a lot of chocolate, but South Africa definitely does.
Yeah.
So just to have that and see each other as potential markets and not always see the Western world. I think that's the main takeaway, to see that we have the power within ourselves.
Yeah.
I think that's the main thing.
No, that's really good. Like, that's really good. The last comment. Yeah, I mean, because from what you're saying, the problem is not to export cocoa.
Yeah.
The problem, like at an African level, is the final use that we make of the cocoa.
Yeah.
And we tend to think only on one way when it comes to cocoa. We tend to think only of chocolate. Yes, chocolate might be the biggest selling product that can actually be created, from cocoa.
Yeah.
But like you said, in Africa, for instance, like men and women, we use a lot of shea butter, like the cocoa oil. I think I've read somewhere it's also good for your skincare. So like, this is another market, that we could explore, because of course it's going to take a while to create like a chocolate market in Africa.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know. I love chocolate. I know people who also love chocolate, but like I said, being developing countries, this is not our priority. When we think of food security, I mean, if you want to help a household, you are not going to give them chocolate first.
Yeah.
You're going to give them like maybe a pack of rice, like a bucket of oil and stuff like that. Like you think about like necessary stuff. So I think you touch on something very critical here. Like, we have the natural resources, but we should also think about like transforming them to also meet our immediate needs in terms of food security and sustainable, like creating a sustainable food sector. Thank you very much. I know I said this was the concluding part. This is definitely the concluding part. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. We've discussed this interesting topic, and I'm very happy with the outcome. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Thank you for listening to your favorite podcast, Smart, Intellectual, Knowledgeable African. And remember, this is the only place where you're always going to have and listen to the most powerful perspectives. Thank you for your time, and à bientôt.